everybody, Brandon here, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be continuing on with our speedrun, and every single time, it never works. Let's try again. Okay, D4, please play. Yes, we're getting a game. So we're continuing on with the London system. I'm going to go for a move 2 bishop to F4. Normally I throw a knight to F3 because I feel like there is some good play to be had there. But this time I'm just going to play normal setup, the triangle setup here. So A6 is not really an inspiring move. I think it does have the purpose of avoiding any of this knight c3, b5 to c7 problems, but it also has problems in other ways. Mainly the fact that, well, is that such a useful tempo? c5 is a good move. I'll play c3. And if they end up taking, I want to take with the e-pawn to create an imbalance. That's kind of an important part of the London is, well, you don't need to create an imbalance, to be clear, but it's always nice to be able to. If they end up taking, I actually could take with the c-pawn because I haven't moved my knight yet. Now I'm a bit more interested in... Well, I have to make some sort of decision. I think allowing them to take isn't so great because they would isolate my d-pawn. There's two other options. There's bishop g3, where knight h5 has to be dealt with. I think there's bishop h4 there, potentially, just to kind of mess with them a little bit. But it might have to eventually go back. Or I can take, developing their queen for them. I think I'm going to develop their queen for them. One good thing is about this is that, well, they might have potential dark square weaknesses. I kind of doubt that'll be the case, but you have to be aware of it. Actually, in the last run I did, which you can see from yesterday's upload, it was kind of a similar circumstance, except the bishop was actually outside of the pawn chain, and there are some benefits to that. So if I take with the c-pawn, they're not really encouraged to play e5. But if I take with the e-pawn, it feels like e5 is important for them to get some play. And I would like to actually encourage this move e5. Mainly because if they play it, they're isolating their d-pawn. This is a big problem because it creates a weakness for them. And, you know, isolated d-pawns aren't always so bad, but the problem is they have to be met with caution. And that caution is trading off pieces. You don't want to allow that. Specifically the piece where, you know, if this becomes isolated, you want to be able to push it and trade it off. That's one of the big parts of an isolated pawn. And as you can see here, there's no dark square bishop. So that's not really an option anymore. This move looks like a little bit of a waste of time, but it's very, very nice. Just kind of slight improvements here. We could also develop the queen off the back rank, but it feels like we're out of the opening stages now, and we're on to the middle game. One actually interesting thing here, you could say, is black might not be out of the opening quite yet, because this bishop on c8 is a little depressing. I'll play rook to e1, sorry. Eventually I might put a knight on e5. I kind of doubt it. I'm kind of happy to see the move e5 from them. I'll play... Should I play a3 here, or perhaps queen to e2? There's also rook to c1, preparing the opening of the file. a3 kind of says you have to spend more time in order to break on that side of the board. I feel like a3 is just the right call. But there is knight a5 to c4 now, which they're actually not going for, interestingly. I could go for knight b3. Knight b3 to c5. Encourages them to play knight to d7, and also prevents knight to a5, more importantly. I'm kind of really happy to prevent knight to a5 from them. So if you can imagine a dream scenario here, what would we want strategically? This is something that a lot of people struggle with because they try to calculate, okay, you know, I want to do this so I can do blah, blah, blah. But there's actually a nice way you can look at chess in general, and that is deciding which pieces are good and which pieces are bad. And we can do this just by looking at the pawn structure. When we see all these pawns, there's a theme. They're all on light squares, and our central pawns are on dark squares. So, therefore, if their pawns are on light squares, their bishop should be bad, because it's also on light squares. If it opens up in the future, like for example, if they can trade these two pawns for these ones, this bishop is no worse than this one. But for the time being, there are some problems that they'll have to solve, namely with this piece. So with this move, queen e2, it's just one of those nice solidifying moves. It's just a small improvement. Maybe I go back to c2 or d2 or something. But it's just trying to be cagey here. Another idea I have in the position is just like rook d1 or rook c1. So they're going for e5, as you can see. And this is a good reason for me to want to play rook d1. If they end up pushing, I can take it. Takes, knight takes, and then I go queen to c2. And I actually want to encourage them to take my bishop on d3. Because as I mentioned before, if I could have a situation where I'm playing against this bishop, that's the only minor piece left, because it's a bad piece. These ones are pretty decent ones, then I'd be pretty happy. And I could do that either by having a bishop or a knight. I would actually prefer a knight, though, I think, to a bishop for that imbalance. And that's mainly because if we look at the knight versus the bishop here, if I put a knight on d4, it can never be attacked. Whereas if I have a light square bishop, if they ever get traded off, then I might lose my advantage. So that's kind of like a long spiel there, but it's very important. Very, very important to understand these strategic themes when you're playing any opening, not just the London. So rook a to d1, and the idea is if they play e5, it's just preparing the rook to be on a semi-open file. Just a normal move here. If they don't do anything, I might play queen to c2, or even bishop to b1, with the idea of potentially going queen c2, seeing if I can provoke some problems for them. It's definitely possible. Yeah, so there we go. And they're actually playing e5, which I think is to our benefit here. So we'll take it. We'll take it again. And we could play queen to h5. I think that's a bit risky. I don't know what's going on after knight takes d3 stuff. Because we could just blunder a piece there. But let me play queen c2. Queen c2 with knight d4 coming. They can take on d3 and then trade on e1 or something if they want to. That's something a lot of players at the lower levels just want to do, right? And we're kind of seeing that now. We might see a trade on e1. But I don't think these are actually good things for our opponent. And that's because at the end of the day, actually one of their best moves might be d4. Just sacrificing the pawn where we can take it. Okay, we'll play knight to d4 instead. And again, yeah, we're just going for a superior minor piece versus a, well, inferior one. And that's it. That's all we're trying to do. And that might be enough to win the game here. So, alright, they're playing rook g6. Things feel a little bit sketchy here. So if I play knight to f5, am I winning? Because knight e7 check does actually pick up this rook, and I'm attacking the queen with this move. So let's play knight to f5. Queen c6 does not work. It actually wins the queen instead of the rook, which is quite nice. Alright. So if I go check and then take, one thing I'll have to be aware of is they're going to take with the f pawn and try to get counterplay on this file here, but I think I can just ignore all of that with this move f3. Normally it's an ugly move to make. You don't want to make moves like f3. But that's genuinely where all of the pressure is coming from, and now probably best bet is to try some like d4, and if I take with the pawn, they sacrifice. But I'm just not going to allow that. So I'm going to continue here with queen to e3, And the good thing about being up material is you can kind of bully your opponent into forcing trades. For example, with this move Queen E3, if they trade, the game's over. Like, there's not really anything to do about it. I just have a rook versus a bishop. And at this level, I'm sure you guys know how to convert those types of positions. So they just can't do it. And we're just going to keep being bullies, essentially. And that's kind of the best way forward. So if they play something like queen to h5, I'll play rook to d4, again, just limiting this bishop at all costs. Queen e5 is interesting, but rook f5 prevents it. Like, I'm trying to go into trades where if they want to avoid it, they have to make some sort of concession, and queen h5 is kind of an ugly-looking move, to say the least. Also, rook f4 isn't so great either, because after rook d4, it does force a trade. They'll have to take on d4. I can take on g5. They don't have any crazy checks or anything. And then I just recapture, and we have a winning endgame there. With triple pawns for them, no less. So that'd be cool. And yeah, queen d4 is another one of those moves that you might think of, but it's not something you want to allow here. Rook takes f3 is possible. Okay, queen to f5. I like rook to d4. I also like rook to d2. I want to play rook to d4, I believe, as this will help avoid any problems. Let me think here. Yeah, let's just go rook to d4. There's no tactics of like exploiting any files or anything. This is the only weak diagonal, but again, it's a light square bishop. We can kind of take those types of liberties of creating weaknesses on the dark squares. We do still want to be careful. We don't want to overdo it and just create weaknesses for the sake of it. We want to have a reason why we're making a certain move. So g3 is playable, and if they take, then we do get a trade-in. That would be really, really helpful. There's also moves like queen to e7 here. Let me think. There's queen d3 now. Queen d3 trying to exploit the fact that this is actually hanging. Is there anything else? Queen e5 would be nice, but after queen c2, if I go back or something, then they might just go back to f5, and then it's just a repetition. But it does ask them what they're doing, right? So I don't know how bad it is if it's just saying, hey, like, find a way to deal with this. Also, queen c2, I might be able to play queen e7, which is good. Because after queen e7, I'm attacking the bishop and the rook. And if they go rook b8, then I do have queen c7. They can never attack this rook at all. Like, they'd have to take here and then take here. But even still, I'd just play rook d1. It takes too many moves. So I think queen e7 actually might be the way to go there at the end. That looks like a winner. So queen e7? Am I missing anything? I don't think I am. And unfortunately, yeah, they're just too slow. Like, if they could take and then take or something, and then I couldn't take on f8 in time, that would be something. It's just not working, though. Rook b8, queen c7, there's no way to defend. One of these pieces is going to be lost. And the second it's a full piece instead of just an exchange, things get so much easier. So that's kind of what we're hoping for here. Rook to f5. Interesting. So I will take. And now after they take here, I could go rook e7. Which is interesting. So they can give a check. Eventually they run out, though, I believe. Maybe they don't so easily. Maybe I should be a little bit careful with that. So I can just play something like queen to e7. And if they take on c3, then I go queen to e3. Yeah, I just want to bring everything back, make sure everything's secured, and after that, I can kind of deal with the problems there. There's a fly on me. That fly has been bothering me all day. It's been crazy. Okay, anyways. Let's take on b5. Nice pawn. And they didn't take b2, so that's good for us. We can go back to e2 here. Secure everything. The only weakness is the b2 pawn. d5 is also hanging. Again, when your opponent's down a piece, things just start to fall in like further and further. And it's not even just because the position's just so good. It's also because when you're down material, it's kind of hard to defend. You know that you're like potentially losing, uh, and it's just a lot to ask. Like, okay, congratulations, you're probably losing. Try to make the best moves. It's not easy. Normally, there goes the saying, when it rains, it pours. And I think that's a very important one for chess. So I will play rook d1 here. Or maybe I should play queen d3. With the idea of like c4 and stuff like that. I like that. I do want to defend this rook. I don't want to mess anything up. c4. It's also rook d1. Let's go rook d1. Just slow play it. Like really, really hard. Ah, there's something in my eye. Okay, there we go. Maybe it was the fly. Alright. So, potentially queen c2. I think their only source of counterplay is like hoping and praying for some sort of rook g5 and queen a2 with mate. But I think because we found that and saw everything there, we're probably fine. Queen c5 could be annoying, just pinning the rook. But I think we're okay there too. Let's go h3. Just get more luft. So like if, for example, queen c5 does get played, then I have king h2 or king h1. But right now, after queen c5, I want to play queen c4, which is kind of a nice move. The whole point is we're threatening to just take on a4 or trade, and we're going to do that in a different way here, it looks like. So queen c4. I was like scared for a second. I thought I maybe blundered, but I'm all good. Queen takes on a4. Okay. And I'm not really too sad about that. How should I do this? Let's go rook 1 to d3. Or not 1 to d3. Let's go rook 4 to d3. And just slowly kind of solve any potential weaknesses we have here. Queen d4. I'll play king h1 maybe next, just to avoid any problems on this diagonal from now on. King h1. For rook g5, we just go rook d2. I think it's a good try, but shouldn't work. Let's go queen d7. And again, being up material, we just have to serve the purpose of being a bully, and that's it. I like this move. This move's a bit annoying. This moving the rook up, because the idea here is we want to go rook g4 here. Interesting. And if I go rook g4? Because this is kind of the whole point here, is rook f3 is not possible. If we take it, that's a little scary, but now, after takes, we should be able to move backwards and be okay. Takes, rook g2, and we actually cover the h3 pawn with our queen. Alright, that's the game. I would say important parts to take away are, this a6 move felt a little slow. I kind of understand where they're coming from. They might be Queen's Gambit accepted players, and the reason why I say that is because if you look at some sort of Queen's Gambit accepted positions, let's just say like knight f3, knight f6, e3, e6, takes a6, this is a very common move to be played. And the whole point here is you play moves like c5 around these points, and you commonly enter these positions. But bishop takes on c5. And these are quite interesting. But yeah, that's why I kind of had the feeling that there might be Queen's Gambit accepted players, because I notably see this like the most here, and I think this is the best form of playing these a6 c5s. Of course, it's playable in other positions too, but of course, since we're playing the London, moves like a6 are just a bit of a waste of time. So yeah, one thing I would like to check on here is first off, bishop d6. It wants knight bd2. Also knight e5, which is interesting. Knight e5, sometimes I think I've played, sometimes I've avoided it. Depends on my preference, but it's kind of scary allowing, or just like having a potentially weak pawn on e5 there. But I guess here it's just working out. So, not much of an advantage. Yeah, c takes d4. E takes is the correct way to take, luckily. And the reason why, again, I think has to do with the point of just dealing with this bishop. As you can see, the further we went on, yeah, it just wasn't really a great position. They never really got their footing, mainly because this bishop was not great. And we were pretty happy about these exchanges. Queen c2. And this is kind of like a, honestly, it feels like a trick move, hoping they take on d3. And after they do, it genuinely feels like it's close to winning. Computer says about plus 0.8 here. But the reason why I'm so like scared for them is just because this knight on d4, it just causes problems. And not to mention there's always tactics in the air. But here it wasn't even tactics that we had to worry about. My cat's going crazy. Hello, Max. Oh, he brought me a toy mouse. Good boy. What a sweet cat. He brought me a gift. You gonna show me it? Look, he brought me... Wow, amazing. I love you, Max. Thank you. Okay, anyways, back to it. So, yeah, knight to d4. And the problem is... Yeah, rook g6 is just not play. Like, honestly, they should probably just take on e1 and accept that they just lost a pretty valuable tempo in a position they're already worse in. But rook g6 just tactically loses on the spot. And it has to do with kind of a lot of things. But one thing, if you're looking for tactics, is spotting fork distance. Just spotting the, like, when a piece is, like, a fork distance away can actually go a huge way for... spotting it like potentially in the future. Like here, knight f5 is by far the most winning move. There's other moves still give it close to winning advantage, but knight f5 is just the game is just over because we're attacking the queen and we're exploiting the fact that e7 would win us the game if we can get our knight there, because it forks the rook and the king. And yeah, that's exactly what happened. So not much else to cover in this game. Everything else was kind of standard and might not be so special to you guys, but focusing on the color complexes, what bishops are good, what bishops could be bad. It's all about the central pawn chain, and the knight fork distance. That's about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.